Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Scholarship Meetup. We do the Meetup events quarterly, and then for this quarter, we're covering the topic of IIIF, and then we have a guest speaker from Glycerine, which is a tool that allows us to view IIIF materials. So today's presentation will be two sections. I will introduce IIIF definitions and then some basic concepts, and also show some applications. And our guest speaker would also covering this specific tool, Glycerine, and how you as a researcher, either you're a student or faculty, can use this tool in your research. So before I cover all of that, I want to introduce myself and also invite our guest speaker to introduce herself as well. So my name is Xing Han. I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian at UCR Library. And you can find out the specific services that I provide via the library on UCR Library's website. So under research support, you will see digital scholarship. In summary, I provide services for faculty, students, and staff. I teach people how to use different digital methods of conducting research and also helping faculty to finish and manage their research projects. And here are some specific areas that I cover via my digital scholarship service. I also help faculty, students, and staff with their publishing needs. That service is covered under Scholar Communication Services. So I help people understand what is academic publishing, open access, authorized, and more. Okay. Isobel, did I say your name correctly? Would you mind?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for having me, Jean. My name is Isabel. I'm the design and implementation lead at Systemik Solutions. And at Systemik, we develop and support a range of open source digital humanities platforms, which includes Glycerine, which is the platform that I'll be demoing today. So I'll talk more about that in my section, but Jean, go ahead and go for it.
Well, thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's move on to the content of this presentation. Okay, so here's some table of contents. As mentioned, we'll introduce what is IIIF. It's an acronym for International Image Interoperability Framework, but people usually just refer this framework as IIIF, as 3I and F. And here is the website. It's iiif.io. Here you can see different examples, applications of IIIF, and also some technical information. And then there's also a really vibrant community where you can find a lot of events, including conferences, a lot of like free online materials. Okay, so it's a technical model. It's a globally adopted open source standardized model for delivering image-based resources. Image-based means it could be image itself, could also be audiovisual materials, could also be 3D materials. So as long as image-based, and it's a really big, vibrant global community, as we have seen on the website. So the community came together trying to solve the problem of delivering, managing, and sharing resources at the scale. Here you can see the definition which IIIF has made for itself. Is a set of open standards for delivering high quality, attributed digital objects online at scale. Okay, so it might be really strange like why we're talking about this. So as we go through different concepts, we will also look at some applications, some examples. Okay, so one of the most important things within the IIIF ecosystem is manifest. Usually you can access a manifest via a URL link that points to a document online in a very specific format called JSON. So a IIIF tool such as a viewer, which Glycerine has a version of a viewer, can allow you to display IIIF content. And then within this JSON format manifest, you can also see the metadata and different related information. And a viewer, as I mentioned, is a tool, sometimes often called a client, to read manifest, to display the image. And usually you can locate what resource is a IIIF resource by the logo. Okay, so now let's just move on to some applications so we can move on from just conceptualization. Okay, so Meridor is one of the viewers, one of the client, one of the tools that can display IIIF content. As we just mentioned, so a manifest would be accessible via URL here. And if I click on this URL, I'll be able to see the JSON format. And then one of the benefits of having materials hosted at IIIF format is if I take the manifest link and then I drop it into a different viewer, I'll be able to display the same material. Okay, let's try to see if that works or not. So as you see, this is a viewer, a tool to display IIIF content called Mirador. If I were to switch this to a different viewer, it's called a universal viewer. You'll be able to see the same content. It just, transported to a different viewer. And then another benefit of using having material hosted as IIIF format is it has this infinite zoom in and zoom out capability. Imagine if you have manuscript and it has like really small notes in the margin, like this IIIF image will be able to you will be able to see the really small font once it's hosted as a IIIF image. I will also see an example of that. And then for IIIF image displayed using the Mirador viewer, it also has a way to display different metadata. Here you can see the rights. You can also see annotations. So in this case, the I is annotated using this frame, and then it has information, in this case, seems to be generated by machine automatically. Okay. So that is a simple example of how some benefits of hosting images and visual-based materials using IIIF. And I want to cover other concepts that you would encounter when it comes to IIIF. The first one is called canvas. As you can imagine, canvas is a place to show the content. In this case, this area I'm circling, this is a canvas. If I'm switching to a different website, so this cultural institution is hosting their materials as IIIF. So this area, if I open this image in a IIIF viewer, this area, the center area, will be the canvas. Okay, and then the next one is called annotation. We saw briefly. So different viewers would have different capabilities when it comes to annotation, and our guest speaker would also mention that in details. And another way of thinking annotation is you can think of a way of contextualizing your materials. Okay, and then collection, you can think of it as a list of manifests. Let's look at example for collections. So remember, for one single image, it will be the manifest URL, and then this URL will be very similar to that, is a URL for collection. And then if I open that URL in a IIIF viewer, I'll be able to see the collection. So this is the JSON format, the manifest for collection, and then this is how it would be displayed in a viewer. As you can see here, if I click Show Collection, you'll be able to see two manifests. So you can think of a collection as a list of manifests. Okay, so those two key concepts are more technical. It's just good to know what they mean. As we have shown, like one of the benefits of having IIIF images, image-based materials would be, it's interoperable, but the image still have to be hosted somewhere. So in this case, this very specific architectural image is hosted by this specific institution, and then that institution is making the manifest available to the public in this URL, which means anyone can take this URL and then put it in any IIIF viewer, and then we'll be able to view by zooming in and zooming out to see the details, and also add contextualizations by adding annotations. Okay. So I know it might be a lot, but also if you follow along with the examples, it might be easier to understand or try to incorporate into your research. And here are some external learning resources if you want to explore more. Now, I'm gonna give the stage to our guest speaker, Isobel, so she can introduce this very specific IIIF application called Glycerine, which includes the viewer, which we have seen, and also other modules that might be really beneficial for your research.
Thank you, Jing. And that was a really great introduction to IIIF. Thank you for having me today. Like I said at the beginning, my name's Isobel. I'm the design and implementation lead at Systemik Solutions. So our work is mainly centered around digital humanities platforms. So we develop and support a range of open source platforms, which includes Glycerine. So Glycerine is a specialist platform for scholarly annotation publishing built using IIIF. It's made up of a suite of modules, but the core two modules I'll be focusing on today in my demo are Glycerine Workbench, where users can manage collections of images and apply annotations directly to those images, and Glycerine Viewer, where the images and annotations can be displayed and explored by end users. So very similar to Mirador Viewer and Universal Viewer, which Jing just showed. If I can just share my screen, give me 1 second. Okay, so I'll show you around Workbench and Viewer. Let's start in Viewer. That's what we're looking at here. So you can see the end product of an annotated image being displayed in the viewer. You can see we have this beautiful ancient Gandharan relief of the Buddha flanked by these two bodhisattvas. And you can see the annotations of the image are in blue, and when I hover my mouse over the annotations, they highlight in yellow. So if I was to click on any of these annotations, I get a small pop-up in the right-hand corner, and then I can see the details of the annotation. We have 3 tabs of detail and a title at the top. So the title is just a very simple description of the area being annotated. In this case, it's a robe. In the About tab, we have a short description. Then in Notes, we've got a couple of notes here. In this case, these notes are linking to external scholarship, but I'll show you when we get to the Workbench side that you can use notes in this tab for any purpose you want, really. Then we have an attribution field. So this is who is responsible for the detail of this annotation. And then a date field, which again can be any date that you want. It could be the date that the annotation was made or a date that is relevant to the annotation, the part of the image that you're annotating. Then finally, we have the tags field. And you can see there's a tag that's been applied to this annotation. If I click on that tag, you can see that it is coming from a controlled vocabulary called the Degethosaurus. And you can see the hierarchy that this tag belongs to. So it starts with figures as the top level of the hierarchy, and then we go down until we get to this, this most narrow tag term that we're using here. Now, the last part of the annotation window is we have a language switcher here because this annotation has also been translated into Italian. So I can switch languages if I like, and then close that annotation when I'm done. Now, up the top of the viewer, we have our controls. The first is full screen, so I can click that. Then we have the index. This is really a navigation tool. It's not very relevant for this image because there's only one image in this particular image set, but you can have up to, you could have hundreds of images in an image set, and then having this index is very useful to navigate through a large number of images. Then we have the annotation table view, which shows the shapes that have been annotated cut out in this table. And then again, we have the details. So I can open that pop-up just like before in the table view and go back to the image. Then we have About, which gives you all the IIIF metadata that's relevant for this image, including information about the canvas, the IIIF manifest, of course, which you can take and use in any other IIIF compatible viewer, so like Mirador, Universal Viewer. We have this play option, which I'll just let that play through while I talk. So basically, this plays the annotations in the order that they were created. And as it goes through, you'll see the pop-up changes as it plays as well. This is useful in some exhibitional contexts. In, a gallery or museum context, you might have the viewer open in an exhibition next to an object on a digital display, perhaps. And then having the annotations playing through just allows the audience to watch it go, which is fun. And we can stop that and zoom back out. And lastly, we have the settings, which is where you can control everything that's shown in the viewer. Firstly, we have our global language control. So this will change, all of the headings and things we have in the viewer. We can choose what annotations to show. So a crucial concept in Glycerine, which I'll talk more about when we get to the workbench side, is we've got a concept called an annotation set. So basically, on an image like this, we've actually got two annotation sets that we're showing here. So it's like two different layers of annotation on the same image. So I can choose, at the moment by default, we show all of the annotations at once, but I could choose to just look at one set. So you can see this is one of the sets, and that's an annotation of the inscription at the bottom of the object. So that's just the syllables annotation, or I could see just the other set if I wanted, which is the more general annotation, or all annotations by default. We can also change our default language for the annotations. So if I wanted to switch to Italian, then the Italian would come up first when I open the annotations. We can filter by line color and weight. For this image, we've only used blue for the annotation. So there's only one option, but I'll show you how to use different colors when we get to that part. And line weight, here it's a bit hard to see, but we've used three different weights of blue. So we've got a dark shade, a medium shade, and a light shade. So you can filter these. And you can see here, we've used the darkest blue, like for example, at this one at the top, which is really hard to see. We've used that dark blue line to denote the largest area of the object. And then the medium blue is any areas within those darker blue areas. And then the lightest blue is any areas within the medium blue. So we've used the weight to kind of denote this hierarchy of annotation on the object. We can also dim the lights on the image, so I can turn that way down. This is useful if you do have, like we have here, very detailed annotations on top of the image. It just makes them stand out a lot more. Or conversely, you can turn up the fill opacity on the annotations themselves, so that also just makes them stand out more in a different way. We can turn off the information panel in the top left. We can choose to include the cutout in the annotation pop-up, and we can change the position of that pop-up. So if I set it to the center, and now I'll open that robe again, then you can see we've got that cutout in the actual pop-up now. And we can adjust the speed of that playback feature that I showed earlier. Okay, so that is the viewer. So the question is, how do we get an image to this point where we have an annotated image displayed in the viewer? We do have to start in Glycerine Workbench for that. So I will switch over now to Workbench. This is what it looks like. You can see on the right-hand side, we have our main dashboard. And on the left-hand side, we have all of our collections listed in the sidebar. Everything in Glycerine lives within a collection. So we've got these three main entities in Glycerine that you should keep in mind when you're working. So the largest entity is the collection. Then within collections, we have image sets. So you can see here, I've got a collection open called Demo Isobel, and it's got 4 image sets in this collection. And then within image sets, we've got annotation sets. So this is what I alluded to before when we were looking at the Buddha, where we've got multiple sets of annotations on this image set. So you can have as many annotation sets as you want on an image set. So keep in mind that hierarchy, top level collections, within that image sets, within that annotation sets. Okay, so if you are starting in Glycerine, you won't see anything here. This will all be blank. So the first thing you'll have to do is add a collection. So click Add Collection in the sidebar. Give it a name and description. I'm going to call this one Gandharan Art. I can add metadata to this collection, any custom metadata that I want. I can add that here and I'll just click Create. Now I have an empty collection and I need to add my first image set. There are a few different ways you can create an image set. The first is to click Add Image Set at the top. Give your image set a name, description, attribution, choose the languages that you'd like to be annotating in. So this is where I would have added Italian if I was doing that Buddha example. And then upload local images from your computer or remotely from elsewhere on the web, or you can individually add IIIF images if you have those. The other way to add an image set, I'll go back to my collection, is to import from a IIIF manifest. So if you do have a IIIF manifest to hand, which I do, you can paste that into this field and click import, and it will just create the image set automatically from the IIIF data. And you can see there's my Buddha. I can go into this image set now and click edit. And if I need to adjust any of those details, I can do that. So maybe I will just add another language here. Maybe I'll do German this time. And I'll click save. So perfect. We've got our first collection with our first image set. We can add as many image sets here as we want. We can also share the collection with other people. So come up to the top of the collection and click share. You need to know the person's email address that you're sharing it with, but you can share it with anyone. And you can define whether you want to give them a collaborator role, which means they can create their own image sets in the collection, or if you want them to just be an annotator, and that means they can only create annotation sets on the image sets that you've made. Now, when you've shared a collection, you can see here in my sidebar, this collection that I just created has this grid icon that indicates that I own it, that I created it. But these ones with a cloud icon, those are collections that have been shared with me. So that's how you can distinguish between the two. Great. So to start annotating, I'll come to my image set, click this 3-dot menu and click Annotate. Now we do need to create an annotation set for our annotations to live in. So I'll do that now. Maybe this can be called Isobel's Annotations. You can give it a description if you want. I'll come back to vocabularies later. And again, I can add custom metadata to the annotation set as well. You can add custom metadata at pretty much every point in Glycerine. So to every entity, the collection, the image set, the annotation set, there's always opportunities for adding that custom metadata. I'll click Create. Got my image set now. I'll come over to this menu again and click Annotate. And this is where I can start drawing my shapes and annotating the image. So at the top of the editor here, we have our annotation tools. Most of these tools are pretty simple click and drag type tools. So for example, this rectangle, I just click, drag, and release, and then I get my annotation pop-up to fill out. Same with the circle, for example. We've got a couple of different ones though. We have the freehand tool, which is you can draw whatever shape you want and then release, and you get that pop-up again. But I would recommend for very detailed annotations, the polygon tool. So this one requires a bit of practice. So you need to click and drag to draw the first line of your shape, release, and then continue to click to place individual points along the shape. So I'm clicking, 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 just going around the bodhisattva here. And then when I get to the end, I double click to close the shape and bring up the annotation template. So those are your drawing tools. I'll fill out some data here for the annotation. So we'll give it a title, a description. I can add HTML to the description if I want. I can add bold or headings. I can even add images, videos, audio. Then below that, I can add links to whatever external sources are relevant to the annotation. In the Notes tab, this is where I can add as many notes as I want. So in the Buddha example I showed you in the viewer, this is where we had references to external scholarship. And you can add as many notes as you want. Attribution, this might be me because I'm the one making the annotation. And date, like I said, this can be any date. I'll put it as today's date. Then finally, we have the tags tab. Now, when you're tagging, you are always tagging from a controlled vocabulary of terms. By default, we have the vocabularies we offer come from an organization called Research Vocabularies Australia, which is the main vocabularies organization here in Australia. So you can choose that option and browse through what they have there. But I would say they're probably very subject specific and very Australia specific. So for most international users, these probably won't be appropriate. You can come over to our sandpit. There might be some more options there which are not officially published on the RVA platform, but you can still use them. We've imported some facets of the Getty Art and Architecture thesaurus here. So you can try using those, although that thesaurus is not technically meant to be broken up in that way. So there may be some data issues there with doing it that way, but it's an option. So for example, let's choose one of these materials. It takes a minute to load, but then we'll see a list of the terms here. So we can browse through these terms and pick the tags that we want. And you can have as many tags as you want. The other option for adding tags is to not go through RVA, but to go through manual entry. So this is what I would recommend for a large vocabulary like the AAT. So what you're doing in this case is manually adding a single tag using the label of the tag, then adding a link directly to that tag, giving its URI, and then also adding the label and URI for the vocabulary as a whole. So a few options there for tagging, you can play around. And if you have any questions and you'd like to work with us to maybe add a custom vocabulary to that sandpit, just let me know, send me an email and we can discuss that. We're happy to help you with that. Okay, well, that's my annotation done. I'll click create and I can see there my first annotation. I'll just add one more quickly just so we can see. Maybe I'll use a different color. So this is where I can choose colors. I'll go green. I can change the line weight if I want to. So this is where we have dark, medium, light. I'll just stick with medium for the green. And we'll draw a circle around our Buddha. Maybe for this one, I'll also add a translation in German. I don't actually know the translation in German, but we'll just add some text there and click create. So now we've got two annotations. And let's say we're all done. We're ready to publish and we want to see these annotations in Glycerine Viewer. Now, publishing in Glycerine is a two-step process. Firstly, let's go back to our collection. And the first thing we need to publish is our image set. So I'll come to this three-dot menu, click Publish, click Yes, and then our image set has been published. So if I come back to the menu, now I've got this public URL option, and I can open the viewer directly from here. We also have options we've got an embed code. So if you wanted to embed this image set in the viewer in an external web page, you could take this shortcode. Or of course, we have the IIIF manifest, which you can copy and take to any other viewer. But I'll open the viewer here. Okay, so, ooh, something's gone wrong there. Let's see. I'll try refreshing. There we go. So you can see we've got our Buddha image here, but we don't see the annotations. And that is because we haven't actually published the annotation set yet as well. So we've published the image set, which is why we can see this viewer. But what I need to do now is to go back to the image set, click annotate. Here's my annotation set that I was working on before. And I need to click publish on this individual annotation set, which I'll do. And the reason we need you to publish the individual annotation set is that you can have as many annotation sets as you want on an image set. So I might have 5 or 10 different annotation sets, and maybe some of them are private to me. Maybe they're just I'm using them for my own research. But I have this one annotation set that I do want to publish formally and share in the viewer. So that's why I need to choose which ones I want to publish. Also, if I've shared my collection with my coworkers, they might have their own annotation sets here as well. So they might want to control the publish status of their own annotation sets. So we've published that. Now, if we come back over to our viewer and refresh the page, we should see the annotations on top of the image. And I can click on this, and there's my detail. That's great. And of course, we can switch to the German. Ugh. Okay, that's not working. If I don't have enough detail in the annotation window, that's hard to scroll, but you can switch if you've got detail in there. Okay, so we're all done. That's the workflow of basic image annotation using Glycerine. If you would like to try Glycerine, you can go to glycerine.io is our website, and register for a free account by clicking this big orange Go to Glycerine button. You can also read more on our website about the platform in general, but also specifically about our institutional integration framework if you're curious about integrating Glycerine with your organization's infrastructure. You can also read about, up here under implementation, you can read about different templates for annotation, which I didn't have time to touch on today. But there are other ways to essentially add more detail and have more complex annotations using templates. I will put my email in the chat if you'd like to get in touch. But also I'm happy to answer any questions right now if you have any. And Jing, I'll just hand back to you.
I think we have one question in the chat.
Oh yeah, do any image all have IIIF manifest or only art history images do? If let's say we take a scenery photo from my phone, how do I create a IIIF from it? Will all images IIIF be archived in IIIF.o? So no, Wendy, essentially for an image to have a IIIF manifest, it needs to be stored on an image server that is compatible with IIIF. So that's usually with an organization, like Glycerine, we have an image set. My radio is just going off in the background. But if you'd like to email me about that, I can get into more detail with you separately.
Um, well, I have like I remember there are also like community-based solutions. So you can technically host your image and have a manifest on GitHub, but then there are many limitations. Um, Also, like all images, all the TripApp images will not be archived on the TripApp IO website. So for example, if UCR library has, TripApp image server, then the images we hosted, TripApp images we hosted would be on our image server. Will not really be archived by TripApp as an organization. But technically, any image can become IIIF. But if your image is really low resolution, it really doesn't have any benefits of having it as IIIF because it really needs the image file itself has to be big. Remember the benefit we talk about, like the infinite zoom in and zoom out, and then the high definition you can still see when it's like zooming really in is because the image file itself is really big. You are zooming into different tiles. So if you're just using, with your old phone taking a photo, technically you can host it as a IIIF image, but there's really not much benefit. And then the image file itself is too small for that application. Isabel, do you think I said it kind of correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right.